10,000 years ago, the Sahara was not a desert. It was alive. Vast grasslands stretched to the horizon. Rivers flowed across the land. Animals moved in great herds. Humans followed them, unaware that their world was slowly dying. The rains began to fade. The land hardened. Lakes disappeared. One by one, people abandoned the empty plains and moved toward the only thing that still promised life. A river that flooded without warning, then retreated, leaving behind dark, fertile soil. The Nile did not simply sustain them, it reshaped their destiny. The Nile was not just a river, it was the only barrier between life and extinction. Each year, without warning, its waters rose. The river overflowed its banks and covered the land in darkness. Villages disappeared beneath the flood. Fields vanished. For a moment, everything was lost, and then the water retreated. What it left behind was not destruction, but life, a layer of black soil, rich and fertile. The people learned its rhythm. They waited, they planted, they stayed. For the first time, humans did not follow life. Life came to them, and beside the Nile, civilization began. As generations passed, the Nile taught humans something greater than survival. It taught them order. The floods came and went with silent precision. The people learned to measure the water. They divided the land. They stored grain for the future. Villages became towns. Towns became territories, and territories became kingdoms. Along the Nile, powerful leaders emerged. They controlled the land, the harvest, and the people. They were not yet called pharaohs. But for the first time in human history, men began to rule not just families, but entire worlds. For centuries, the Nile was divided. Independent kingdoms rose along its banks. Each ruled its own land. Each worshipped its own gods. Each believed itself eternal. But in the south, a ruler emerged unlike any before him. His name was Nama. He did not seek to rule a village. He sought to rule everything. His armies moved north following the river. Kingdom after kingdom fell beneath his command. And for the first time in human history, the two lands became one. Upper Egypt, Lower Egypt, united under a single crown. Egypt was born. Nama united the two lands. But unity alone was fragile. To hold Egypt together, power had to become something greater than human. The ruler became pharaoh, not simply a king, but the living center of order. Priests taught that he spoke with the authority of the gods. His duty was to protect balance, truth, and stability across the land. If the Nile flooded and the harvest came, Egypt believed the pharaoh had fulfilled his role. From mud brick palaces beside the river, his word shaped the lives of thousands. Through him, Egypt became more than land. It became destiny itself. Power was no longer temporary. It became eternal. The pharaoh was no longer seen as merely human, but as a living god whose authority bound heaven and earth. His survival beyond death became essential to the stability of the world itself. To ensure this, something never before seen was attempted. In the desert at Saqqara, stone replaced mud. Under the direction of the architect Imhotep, workers raised a structure that defied time. Layer upon layer, it rose toward the sky. The step pyramid was not simply a tomb, it was a declaration. Egypt had discovered permanence, and nothing would ever be the same again. What began at Saqqara did not end there. It was only the beginning. Pharaoh Sneferu pushed the limits further, experimenting with shape, angle, and scale. His builders learned through failure, adjusting their designs, searching for perfection. Then came his son, Khufu. Under his command, something unprecedented rose from the desert plateau at Giza. Stone upon stone, layer upon layer, tens of thousands worked in coordinated effort. The Great Pyramid was not merely larger, it was absolute. A mountain built by human hands, a monument designed to defy time itself. Egypt had mastered monumentality, and the world would never see its equal again. When it was finished, nothing like it had ever existed. The Great Pyramid rose above the desert, its smooth limestone surface reflecting the sun with blinding brilliance. It could be seen from miles away, a perfect geometric form imposed upon the natural world. It was not built by slaves, but by farmers, labourers, craftsmen and engineers working in organised rotations. They were fed, housed and honoured. This monument was not only for the king, it was for eternity. It declared that Egypt had achieved something no civilization had before. It had built permanence into the earth itself, and its legacy would outlive them all. Hidden deep within the pyramid lay its true purpose. Narrow corridors descended into darkness, leading to sealed chambers far below the surface. Only priests and chosen workers ever entered these sacred spaces. Here, the pharaoh's body was prepared for eternity. Wrapped in linen, surrounded by objects for the afterlife, he was no longer mortal. He had become divine. Every wall, every passage, every stone served a single function: to protect him forever. The pyramid was not built for the living. It was built for what came after death. Within its silent interior, Egypt's kings prepared to live forever beyond time itself. The pyramids were not built by slaves. They were built by workers. Archaeologists discovered entire cities beside Giza where these workers lived. They had houses, bakeries, medical care, and organised food supplies. Their diet included bread, beer, onions, and meat. Injured workers received treatment. Broken bones were set. Some even survived amputations. They worked in rotating teams, especially during the Nile floods when farming stopped. Graffiti left behind reveals their names. One crew called themselves the Friends of Khufu. These were not prisoners, they were skilled labourers, builders of the impossible. They knew they were constructing something that would outlive their own lives forever. The pharaoh was not seen as a ruler. He was seen as a god. Egyptians believed he controlled the Nile, the harvest, and the balance of the universe itself. His word was absolute. His image was sacred. Ordinary people never looked directly at him. They bowed, lowering their eyes in his presence. Priests served him, officials obeyed him, armies fought for him. Every temple, every monument, every law existed in his name. He was not separate from Egypt. He was Egypt. When he lived, the world remained in order. When he died, the entire civilization prepared for his eternal journey beyond death itself. When the pharaoh died, Egypt did not see it as an end. It was a transformation. His body was carried into hidden chambers deep inside the pyramid. There, priests began the sacred ritual of preservation. They removed internal organs, dried the body in natron salt, and wrapped it carefully in linen. This process took 70 days. They believed the body must remain intact so the soul could live forever. Outside, Egypt continued to function. But inside the pyramid, eternity was being prepared. The king was no longer a man. He was becoming something greater. He was becoming eternal. He was becoming divine forever. For centuries, the pharaoh's authority had been absolute. But slowly, something began to change. The Nile did not flood as it once had. Harvests weakened. Food became scarce. Local governors grew more powerful, controlling their own regions and armies. The pharaoh's control began to fracture. Egypt was no longer united. Tombs became smaller. Pyramid construction stopped entirely. The age of monumental building had ended. The centralized power that built the pyramids collapsed. Egypt entered its first great crisis. For the first time in centuries, the pharaoh was no longer seen as all-powerful. The system that built eternity had begun to fall apart. Egypt was no longer one kingdom. It was many. Regional rulers controlled their own territories, armies, and resources. The authority of the pharaoh had weakened beyond recognition. Without central control, order collapsed. Tombs were looted. Monuments were neglected. Local leaders declared themselves kings. Egypt had entered the first intermediate period. For the first time in centuries, there was no single ruler over all Egypt. The age of unity had ended. But Egypt did not disappear. It endured. In the south, a new power was rising. A ruler from Thebes began to gather strength, and slowly, the process of reunification began once again. From the south, a new ruler emerged. His name was Mentuhotep. From his capital in Thebes, he began a campaign to reunite Egypt. Region by region, he defeated rival rulers. Slowly, Egypt became one kingdom again. Order was restored. The authority of the pharaoh returned. This marked the beginning of the Middle Kingdom. It was not an age of massive pyramids, but of stability, administration and control. Egypt rebuilt its strength. The state became organized again. Officials governed the land, agriculture recovered. Egypt was no longer collapsing, it was recovering. The civilization that had nearly fallen was alive once more and stronger than before. They came from the east. Foreigners unlike any Egypt had faced before. The Egyptians called them the Hyksos. They brought new weapons, composite bows, stronger than anything Egypt possessed. And something even more shocking: the horse. For the first time, Egyptian soldiers saw war chariots moving across the battlefield at speed. Egypt was unprepared. City after city fell. The Nile Delta came under foreign control. Egyptian rulers retreated south. For the first time in centuries, Egypt was ruled by outsiders. But Egypt did not surrender completely. In the south, resistance was growing, and the knowledge of their enemy would soon become their greatest weapon. Egypt had learned from its enemy. In Thebes, Egyptian rulers studied Hyksos weapons. They built their own chariots. They trained their own horse units. They forged stronger bows. Egypt was transforming. Under the leadership of Pharaoh Ahmose, the Egyptian army marched north. Battle after battle, they pushed the Hyksos back. Cities were retaken, fortresses fell. Finally, the Hyksos were driven out of Egypt completely. Egypt was free again, but something had changed. Egypt would never be vulnerable like that again. It would not wait for invasion. It would strike first. Egypt had become a military empire. Its age of conquest had begun. Egypt was no longer defending itself, it was conquering. Under powerful pharaohs like Thutmose III, Egyptian armies marched beyond their borders. They crossed deserts, rivers, and mountains. They invaded foreign lands in Syria and Canaan. Cities fell before them, kingdoms surrendered, tribute flowed into Egypt: gold, weapons, livestock, and prisoners. Egypt had become the dominant power of the ancient world. Its army was unmatched, its wealth was enormous, its influence stretched far beyond the Nile. This was the height of Egyptian power. The pharaoh was no longer just king of Egypt. He was ruler of an empire built through strength, strategy, and war. For over 1,000 years, Egypt had worshipped many gods. But one pharaoh would change everything. His name was Akhenaten. He rejected the old gods. He declared there was only one true god, the Aten. He closed temples. He erased the names of ancient gods. He built a new capital in the desert, a city dedicated to Aten alone. Egypt had never seen anything like it. The old religion collapsed. Priests lost their power. The balance of tradition was broken. After his death, Egypt would erase him from history. His experiment had failed, but his rebellion would remain one of Egypt's greatest mysteries forever. For over 3,000 years, Egypt had endured. It had built pyramids, it had conquered empires, it had survived invasion and collapse. But now a new power had risen: Rome. Its armies were unstoppable. Egypt was no longer the conqueror, it was the prize. Its final ruler was Cleopatra. She fought to preserve Egypt's independence, but she failed. In 30 BC, Roman forces took control. Egypt became a province of Rome. The age of the pharaohs ended. The civilization that built eternity was gone, but its monuments remained, silent, immovable, watching. Egypt had fallen, but its legacy would outlive every empire that followed.